In this video, we will take a passage, a difficult one, and apply rules to skim that we saw in the previous video. Our aim is to skip the irrelevant data and comprehend the main idea by focusing on what is important. Please go through the passage first. It's available in the description. I hope you have read the passage. Now let's read it together. The painter is now free to paint anything he chooses. So the author is talking about the painter. The pronoun he is referring to the noun painter. Let's read further. There are scarcely any forbidden subjects, and today everybody is prepared to admit that. Here, today everybody is prepared to admit that. This part, written before that, is not important. So what is important is there are no forbidden subjects, and a painting of some fruit can be as important as a painting of a hero dying. The Impressionist. Now if you don't know the meaning of Impressionist, doesn't matter. From the context, we can think of it as some kind of painter. Let's read further. The Impressionist or the painter did as much as anybody to win the previously unheard of freedom for the artist. Yet is a contrast keyword. What is written after yet will be in contrast to what is written before it. Yet by the next generation, painters began to abandon the subject altogether and began to paint abstract pictures. Today, the majority of pictures painted are abstract. The author introduces two types of painting, one that is based on subject and one that is abstract. And the contrast between the two is shown by the keyword yet. Next para. Is there a connection between these two developments? Has art gone abstract because the artist is embarrassed by his freedom? Is it that because he is free to paint anything, he doesn't know what to paint? Passage started with the painter is now free to paint on any subject, and then the author says yet now painters are painting abstract pictures. This is what author is talking about in these two developments. These is pronoun referring to two types of paintings mentioned in the previous para, subject based and abstract. We can spot two because here, which is a cause and effect keyword, after which we will get reasons. The author gives two reasons after because about why the art has gone abstract. Artists are embarrassed about the freedom and confused about what to paint. Reading further, apologists for abstract art often talk of it as the art of maximum freedom. You can skip the word apologist if you don't know the meaning and identify it as some class of people who have a certain opinion about abstract art, that it is an art of maximum freedom. You must have guessed by now that this word abstract is going to come again and again. This is what it means. Abstract art is some kind of impression of a thing rather than the actual thing. Further, the passage says, but could this be the freedom of the desert island? It would take too long to answer these questions properly. I believe there is a connection. Many things have encouraged the development of abstract art. Among them has been the artist's wish to avoid the difficulties of finding subjects when all subjects are equally possible. But is the contrast word which is contrasting or questioning the freedom of abstract art. Freedom of desert island means freedom of a man on an uninhabited island. So the author is saying that artists provided with the freedom of choosing a subject are having difficulties in choosing one, as all are equally good. So they are going for abstract paintings. These are the same points which were made after the keyword because. Reading further. I raise the matter now because I want to draw attention to the fact that the painter's choice of a subject is a far more complicated question than it would at first seem. We can skip what is written before that. The content which is important is that painter's choice of a subject is a complicated question. Reading further, a subject does not start with what is put in front of the easel or with something which the painter happens to remember. Something is put in front of easel. So easel must be some painting instrument. Easel actually means a wooden frame for holding the canvas. This is again stressing on the fact that painter's choice of subject is complicated. Reading further, a subject starts with the painter deciding he would like to paint such and such because for some reason or other he finds it meaningful. A subject begins when the artist selects something for special mention. What makes it special or meaningful may seem to the artist to be purely visual, its color or its form. When the subject has been selected, the function of the painting itself is to communicate and justify the significance of that selection. Because a cause and effect word is giving an answer to how a subject is selected by a painter to begin with. Now these lines, what makes it special till here, this is an extra detail and can be skipped. So a subject is chosen because it has some value to the painter. The painting should also depict that value. Basically in the whole para, the author explained the significance of subject in painting. Moving to the next para, it is often said today that subject matter is unimportant. Although it is only a reaction against the excessively literary and moralistic interpretation of subject matter in the 19th century, in truth, the subject is literally the beginning and end of a painting. We skipped words before that. This dependent clause from although till century can be avoided. The content which is important to note will come after the contrast keyword in truth. That subject is beginning and end of a painting. In fact, this is the independent clause. So author said first that people say that subject matter is unimportant, but he contrasted to this opinion by saying in truth, subject is everything for painting. Reading further, the painting begins with a selection. I will paint this and not everything else in the world. It is finished when that selection is justified. Now you can see all that I saw and felt in this and how it is more than merely itself. Here also we skipped extra and irrelevant details. So the important gist is that painting begins with a selection and finishes when selection is justified. Reading next para. Thus, this thus is a concluding keyword. So what will follow will be the conclusion for something. Thus, for a painting to succeed, it is essential that the painter and his public agree about what is significant. The subject may have a personal meaning for the painter or individual spectator, but here comes the contrast word but, which will give some counterpoint to the argument that subject has its own meaning for the painter as well as an individual spectator. But there must also be the possibility of their agreement on its general meaning. So there is a possibility that the meaning is same in a certain respect. It is at this point that the culture of the society and period in question precedes the artist and his art. So we can obtain the gist that painter and public should have a certain level of agreement on the subject. Reading further, Renaissance art would have meant nothing to the esthetes and vice versa. If, to some extent, a few intellectuals can appreciate them both today, it is because their culture is a historical one. Its inspiration is history and therefore it can include within itself, in principle, if not in every particular, all known developments to date. Skip part before that and skip the example data here. Further, keyword because is explaining the same gist that for intellectuals to appreciate an art, it should have a defined subject. The author supports this by giving an example of an art with well-defined subject as history. Further para says, when a culture is secure and certain of its values, it presents its artist with subjects. The general agreement about what is significant is so well established that, skip the text before that, the significance of a particular subject accrues and becomes traditional. This is true. For instance, now for instance is example keyword, so what will follow can be skipped. For instance of reeds and waters of China, nude body in Renaissance and animals in Africa. Furthermore, in such cultures, the artist is unlikely to be a free agent. He will be employed for the sake of particular subjects, and the problem, as we have just described it, will not occur to him. So author, with the help of sequence keyword, furthermore adds to his comparison of subject and tradition, that in traditional art the subject was well defined and the artist didn't have a problem in choosing it. Reading further. When a culture is in a state of disintegration or transition, the freedom of the artist increases, but the question of subject matter becomes problematic for him. He himself has to choose for society. This was at the basis for all the increasing crisis in European art during the 19th century. It is too often forgotten how many of the art scandals of that time were provoked by the choice of subject. Jerry called Courbet, Daumier, Degas, Lautrec, Van Gogh, etc. We can skip the example data in the last line. Examples of artists are given. Summary of this is that when culture is in transition, freedom of artists increases. However, the author has also given a contrasting point to it after contrast keyword but, that although freedom of artists increases, the choice of the subject becomes problematic, which has caused crisis in the art in 19th century. Let's read the last paragraph. By the end of 19th century, there were, roughly speaking, two ways in which the painter could meet this challenge of deciding what to paint and so choosing for society. Either he identified himself with the people and so allowed their lives to dictate his subjects to him, or he had to find his subjects within himself as painter. So earlier we talked about what happened in 19th century. Now we are discussing the end of 19th century. The painters had two ways to decide what to paint. The two ways are explained using the keywords either or. Let's tag each pronoun to its respective noun. Two major nouns are painter and people. All the pronouns marked in red are for the painter and the pronoun there marked in blue is for the people. The author is simply saying that painters in 19th century either picked subject as per life and culture of people around, or he found the subject within himself. Reading the last few lines. By people, I mean everybody except the bourgeoisie. Many painters did, of course, work for the bourgeoisie according to their copybook of approved subjects, but all of them filling the Salon and the Royal Academy year after year are now forgotten, buried under the hypocrisy of those they served so sincerely. If you don't know the meaning of bourgeoisie, you can take it as a certain class of people for whom some painters worked for. So the author is concluding here by saying that many painters did work for a specific class of people as per these people's chosen subjects. But all of them pronoun here refer to painters. All of them are now forgotten under the hypocrisy of those. Those here is the pronoun for the class of people known as bourgeoisie, for whom some painters worked for. They again refer to the painters who worked for bourgeoisie. So most of the painter took subjects related to people and their lives, or they found subjects within themselves. But there were some who worked for others and they are no more remembered. So by skipping the irrelevant data, we reduced 30% of the passage. Also, the process of focusing on keywords, pronouns and clauses made this unseen passage a little familiar. Three important things. When we are skipping some text while reading a passage, your focus should be more on what is left. What is to be skipped is easy to determine, but your focus should be more on what remains after skimming. That part is important. Secondly, the things we have skipped, is it a surety that no questions will be asked from them? For questions which require an understanding of the passage, this what we did is the way to go. But there might be direct questions for which you can very well refer the lines from which the question has been asked. Thirdly, these rules may not be helpful in many cases, but one thing that I can assure you is that taking a conscious effort for applying these rules will improve your comfort level and familiarity with an unseen passage. Thanks for watching.